Welcome to Lift the Gate with Lift Business Resources, the interview series that's all about eliminating business knowledge gatekeeping and sharing the tools you need to elevate your business. I'm Katie Santoro, and I'm thrilled to have you here. This series is designed for business owners like you who are eager to learn, grow, and navigate the challenges of running a successful business with confidence and clarity. Each episode, we bring you educational conversations with industry leaders, experts, and entrepreneurs who are here to share their expertise and real-life strategies to help you elevate your business. Today, I'm excited to introduce our guest, Christina Eskridge, the founder and executive director of Elevate Theater Company. Christina is an inspiring leader who bridges the world of public health and theater, leveraging storytelling as a powerful tool for health promotion. In this episode, we'll dive deep into the art of nonverbal storytelling and how we can use it in business and leadership to become aware of what we are trying to tell others, creating more clarity and consciousness in communication. Let's get started. Hi, Christina. Thank you for joining us today. Let's start a little bit by you introducing yourself and telling us just a little bit about how you got into this intersection of public health and theater.
Sure. Thanks, Katie. I'm glad to be here. My name is Christina D. Eskridge. I am a theater maker. That's my sort of all-encompassing title these days. I started out with a master's in public health and a passion for performing arts, doing theater kind of on the side as a hobby. About 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, I ended up moving to New York and deciding to pursue theater full time as an actor. I still had a master's in public health, and so I was using healthcare consulting and hospital administration support work as kind of my survival gig. Right, I didn't do the typical actor bartending, babysitting, barista kind of pathway. But I was instead helping hospital executives think through their strategies, understand hospital flow, think through some of their metrics and alignment with regional offices and local offices. And I did that work for about 12 years. And about 6 years ago in 2018, I performed in a show called Up and Away, and it was specifically for children with autism and their families. And there was this beautiful big umbrella festival at Lincoln Center Education. And this festival was geared towards this population, but also the caregivers, the teachers, and the other folks who were interfacing with children with autism and helping them think about arts-based methodologies for engaging these young people. And I was like, light bulb moment. This is why you have a master's in public health. You have to start thinking about storytelling and theater as a community building exercise, as an educational vehicle, and as something that promotes health and wellness. So I always say, like, we're not going to cure anything necessarily, but we are going to provide folks with a improved quality of life, whether that be through the information and education, through the inspiration to action, or through the building of community and social supports. Well, that's
So,
that.
just to bring it back a little bit, like I know that theater was kind of your original passion. What was it about the health field that made you want to go into public health? What was your calling there?
Oh, that's such a great question because most people focus on the theater side of things. So thank you for bringing that
I
in.
mean, the health field is not an easy field to go into.
It's not. So I actually studied Spanish language as an undergraduate, and studied abroad and did a lot of work in free clinics and community-based clinics working with Spanish-speaking populations. And it was a passion of mine to make, I think this is also why theater works for me, and why I enjoy it, but making accessible health and wellness to populations that are limited English proficient. Because medicine is hard to understand even in the best of circumstances, but if your language skills aren't available, if they're not available there and you're not able to speak in your mother tongue, then we need interpreters, we need folks who are there to support those populations. And so originally I went into public health school as thinking I would be either interpreting or working on a policy level for limited English proficient populations, helping hospitals create standards around how they're going to provide language services. And that sort of morphed and shifted as it does as jobs became available, and healthcare consulting sort of opened the doors to having a broader reach on projects that impacted populations of all kinds. So, my original pathway was through my language skills and realizing that, man, healthcare is really hard to navigate no matter what. How do we make it easier for people? And I think that's exactly what Elevate Theater is doing, right? Trying to use storytelling as a way to invite people in and identify pathways for their understanding and for their engagement.
Yeah, I was really thinking when you were talking about, using Spanish language and that language barrier, theater is your language here, right? Like it's another way to help people interpret what's going on in the medical world. Because
That's exactly right.
half the time we can't understand what we're being presented, and we really have to be our own advocates at this point. That's awesome. And just kind of like another little sidebar, when you found that moment of alignment, when you realized that like, oh, I can put these things together. What did that feel like for you internally?
So the first performance of Up and Away was sort of this like monumental moment, right? Because I'm doing what I love as a performer, but I'm also supporting these families because oftentimes they're not sensory friendly, or sensory, like there's not a sensitivity to a sensory need or an accessibility need in the theater, right? The theaters are built in a particular way that requires you to sit down in a seat in an aisle and look and pay attention, and the lights go down, and we sort of had a different approach. And so that first performance, getting to it was very small scale. So I was paired with an individual audience member. And so then my performance really reflected their needs. So if they needed headphones because things were too loud, or they wanted to touch every prop, I was able to acquiesce and adapt in that way. And so I think I just felt like, oh, wow, theater is so much more than entertainment. It is so expansive. And I'm smiling so big because I remember after one of the performances, I invited people over because I was like, what would a theater company be like if it was all about health? What would it be like? And so my apartment is 450 square feet, teeny, teeny, tiny. I invited 12 people. Everyone was sitting on top of each other. I had pizza and beer, and I said, help me think about this. We put sticky notes all over my door because I don't even have a wall that I could use to make sense of it all. But we brainstormed, we collaborated, and we again built community in that space, thinking about what this could be. And at first I thought maybe it's just for kids. And then I thought, well, maybe it's for everybody, but we have programming that's targeted towards youth. We have programming that's targeted towards older adults, um, et cetera. And so it's sort of morphed and evolved from there. Um, I will say, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this at all, but pandemic definitely threw a wrench in how I originally conceptualized the idea of Elevate.
Yeah, when you were talking about having 12 people in your apartment, I was like, this has to be prior to COVID because
2018.
yeah, I mean, we stopped doing that for a long time. And even now, I know I'm a little bit hesitant to be in large groups as well. So we still do it, but it's been a switch. Great. So, I love like living in alignment, right? Like when you get that business idea and you're like, wait, hold on, like my life doesn't have to be this and this. Like my life can be both of these things together and I
Yeah,
can live this alignment. And for me, it's always my mantra has always been build a life worth living. And that's what you're doing through building your
that's
business.
really beautiful.
So we have talked about storytelling and the nonverbal storytelling we've talked about today, and you and I have talked about it on our own. So this is what's interesting to me for what you do is like how do we become more aware of what our nonverbal storytelling is sharing? Especially, I mean, I do Zoom calls all the time with people. Who knows what I'm telling them from my Zoom call, right? So like how do we become more aware of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first is just dropping in. I mean, this sounds very woo-woo in some ways, right? But
All good.
thinking about breath, right?
Mhm.
Dropping into your breath and recognizing that your chest could be expanding, your stomach could be expanding, your shoulders could be moving, but there's a lot of non unconscious movement that happens when you breathe.
Mhm.
And we know that we are able to do this without thinking all the time. We take our breath for granted every day. Myself, all of us do, because it's the thing that we are able to do. When you can't do it, that's when you start to be changed, right? And be like focused on it. But if we can start to drop into our breath, there is so much that it can tell us. If it's quick, if it's deep, that those deep sighs you get, you're crunching, you're on your computer, you're doing all the things, and whoa, what was that? What was that telling me? Do I need to stand up? Do I need to take a break? Am I frustrated? Am I excited? Am I, what is the breath sharing with us as we unconsciously allow it to move our bodies? Um, and I think oftentimes we don't recognize that our breath is supporting our storytelling. So when you are speaking, um, I often give this example where I'm talking really, really fast and then I lose my breath and I can't say it out. I get really constricted and then I have to go again, right? That's just anxiety provoking for all of us, me, you, the audience, whomever, right? And so breath is something we can use at punctuations. We can use it while we're thinking. We do not have to immediately respond to something. We can then use our breath to say the next statement because we've had a moment to think. And that didn't take long. And hopefully you weren't bored in that 4 seconds that it took me to take a breath, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I think the first step is just dropping in and noticing it when you're just on your everyday. The second piece of nonverbal communication is recognizing and having some postural awareness. And I have to thank my friend and colleague, Greg Udan, for giving me that language because I was thinking just like, yeah, you got gestures, you got your body. I didn't have that language of postural awareness. Just
Mhm.
recognizing, are my shoulders up? Am I hunched? Am I tense? Am I like, and none of those things are bad, right? We need to come at it from a non-judgmental perspective.
Yeah, I'm
But we,
definitely over here like, oh wait, hold on. Let
yeah,
me just
every
relax.
time I mention posture, people are like, okay, up and get myself together.
Suddenly very aware of my shoulders.
Exactly. But it's not about that. It is about it's not about you judging it. It's about you being aware of it,
Mhm.
right? And then being able to say, do I need to hold the tension right here? Combining that with your breath, whoo, that's like so much more powerful.
It's like a little meditation.
But it can be done in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
How am I breathing? How am I sitting? How is that telling someone else what I'm feeling today? Or is it? Um,
Do
the
you
last thing, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you ever find that some people are uncomfortable when you take a break to breathe? I know I told you this, but my husband freaks out when I'll take like a really big breath because I tend to breathe really shallowly if I'm not paying attention. And then
Mhm.
my brain will go, hold on, like you need a full big breath to get you through this moment. And I'll take a big breath and it comes out as a sigh and he'll be like, what's wrong? Like nothing is wrong. Like I just like that's what my body needed. So what do you see from the perspective of the people watching you do this? Like, are people uncomfortable with other people breathing deeply or aligning their posture?
I think people are uncomfortable with themselves.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, if we're in a big group, right, workshops are usually 25 to 30 people, and we're all gonna like, get what I call neutral posture. Um, and we build it from the feet all the way to the head. And when we do that, oftentimes looking around like, self-conscious of what other people might think of them. But the reality is, everyone is worried about what they're doing and other people thinking about them. But they're not actually watching anyone else. In reality, they're not taking it in, they're just concerned about themselves. And so if we take away, again, taking away judgment and value assignment, and we just understand what it is. Oh, my back hurts a little bit today. Does that mean I need to stretch more? Does that mean I need to stand up more while I'm working? Right? Having some of that awareness, you're saying you breathe in a shallow way, and then all of a sudden, whew, I need that, right? To really reset. I wonder if you had a little bit more awareness more frequently, would those big sighs continue? Maybe you need them. That's fine too, right? Again, no judgment here. Um, but I find that most people are self-conscious. They're not uncomfortable with me doing it because I try to be as outlandish as possible so that no one is uncomfortable. But they're more worried about what others might perceive from them, right? It's more about like, oh, how can I hide in this moment?
I used to teach yoga, and one of the things I would say to our beginners is nobody's looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's too concerned about what they're doing.
Exactly.
Nobody's looking at you. If you need to look at someone, look at me. I don't care, but nobody cares what you're doing.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think if there is the off chance that someone is looking at you and they're judging you, that is way, I mean, we can get into the psychology behind that, but like that is their issue. It has literally nothing to do with you, and it's none of your business.
Yeah, like my mom says, other people's opinions of you are none of your business.
Exactly.
It's a
Exactly.
great way to live. Awesome. When we kind of talked about it, like some of the ways that people are using nonverbal storytelling, how we become more aware of our own stories we're projecting. Talk about how this applies in a work environment. Like I see how it works in a social environment. How does it apply in a work environment?
Well, there's a variety of things that we do non-verbally that give a story to someone else. And if you think about explaining something to a direct report or trying to train someone on something, and they might have a look on their face with a furrowed brow and they lean forward, right? Um, that storytelling could could be a variety of things, but in general, they're engaged, right? Whether they are confused or excited or overwhelmed, you may not know without asking questions, but there is a posture that is telling us engagement, right? Leaning forward, furrowed brow, hand on the chin. Like these are things that we know are engagement, right? They're not off thinking about what they're going to cook for dinner tonight. They're fully focused in here. On the opposite end of the spectrum, leaning back and having your arms crossed may not necessarily mean I'm disengaged, but it certainly doesn't mean that I am as immersed, right, as I potentially could be or might you might want me to be. And I think the reality is not that we want to predict or start to guess what other people's body language is telling us. That's not my goal with these workshops. It's more about the individual awareness. So if you're not trying to portray disengagement, then maybe a neutral posture is better for a particular environment when you're in a training or when you're speaking with a colleague.
Mm.
If you're trying to convey interest and you want someone to recognize that in you, perhaps you want to have some awareness that leaning forward might help them understand that. I had an experience once with a colleague where I was very conscious of looking her in the eyes. And one day she asked me if I could step into the conference room and um, so we could have a private chat. And I was like, sure. And she goes, why do you always stare at me like so deep into my eyes? I don't understand. Are you trying to confront me? Like, what's the deal? And then I realized, oh, wow, that effort was perceived, or that story that I thought was engagement was something different. And so just having an awareness of myself and then tailoring it to the audience based on their feedback to me allows me to show up authentically and portray the things that I would like. So that experience made me realize, oh wow, sometimes it's not about, like me being very focused, right? Sometimes it's about allowing someone to just roll, like to wash over you and have that conversation. And I'm really grateful that she was willing to call me out and help me recognize that eye contact sometimes can be intimidating or it can be challenging for people. And so having that awareness, especially in a asymmetrical relationship, if you're a leader and you're talking to someone who reports to you, or a peer or someone who you report to, all of those dynamics might be different. And again, we're not trying to solve the crystal ball of what is this person trying to tell me. We want to just be aware of what we are trying to tell others so that we are clear and conscious. And if sometimes that backfires, thank goodness people will give us that feedback, right? And we can incorporate it into our everyday.
Yeah. So I know you do like a team building workshop. Something that just popped into my head as I was like, you should train people on how to interview. Because when we interview people, we see what I perceive in an interview as disengagement, right? Like sitting back, looking at different screens. I sometimes like to tell people on a call, like, hey, I have another screen over here I'm gonna be looking at, or I'm looking down because I'm looking at my notes. So I'm always like picking up my pen because I'm like, yes, I have this pen. I'm not just looking
I
down
am
there
taking notes.
doing something with it. But I think people aren't always aware of that and aware of how unengaged they appear to be. And if you're in a position like a job interview or you're meeting with your superior and you come across as really unengaged, that's either you're not gonna get the job or you're not gonna keep that job for very long. So
And
really,
Zoom is a really tricky place, right? Because we just have this box. You can't
mhm.
see, below my chest. So it's really hard for me. I mean, I use my hands a lot when I speak, regardless of whether I'm in the Zoom box or not. But I think that is one limitation, right? We can't give full vibes through the Zoom screen. And that's unfortunate, but we can be aware of that challenge. We can rise to that occasion and be, mindful of how we position ourselves. What's behind us? How are we leaning in? What's the oh, let me check something. And when your eyes dart because you're checking a website, because you want to bring it into the conversation, articulating that out loud, right? Because that nonverbal darting of the eyes, clear clicking of the keys could be perceived as disengagement. So, we have many of us have skills in uh, verbal communication, and so we should use them
Mhm.
so that we're articulating what is happening in addition to the story that we're telling non-verbally.
Yeah. So I know you have a team building workshop. Can you tell me a little bit about how it's helping your clients? And I feel like we've already kind of covered some of this, but let's just go over the finer details of it.
I mean, I would say there are about, like, I'll highlight three things that I think our workshops support in teams. The first is just getting into your bodies, right? We are so disembodied when we're on Zoom or when we're no long when we're working from home, right? Half of us are multitasking all of the time because like I don't know if this is true for everyone, but my pre-pandemic life was very disconnected from the computer. I was very like in touch with my phone, and I had email and I was doing things on the computer, but I was often in person and writing handwritten, or as the kids say, like analog notes, right? Um, I wasn't being distracted by every notification, right? And so I feel like we get a little disconnected from our bodies and our purpose when we are constantly stuck on a screen that is just dictating all of the things that we do all day. And so the first thing is really just getting people into their bodies, feeling 2 feet on the ground. And even if we're in a Zoom environment for the workshop, I have people stand up. I don't care if I only see from here down because you didn't move the camera or whatever. Like, I don't care if you turn your camera off, but standing up in that environment is a little jarring, a little different, but connects you with your body. So that's sort of like the first thing I would say. People get. The second is you get to see your colleagues doing fun things. And you get to do fun things, right? 99% of the time people walk out joyful because we were silly today. We were wearing, fun sunglasses. Perhaps there was a feather boa involved. Maybe I learned something new about my colleague that I didn't know before, because we do you know, sort of arts based icebreakers and things of that nature. Um, we, I think people don't always share every part of themselves, which is perfectly fine. But we do have multiple sides. And when you get to see your colleagues doing things that are out of context and silly, I think there is a level of trust and empathy and engagement that starts to blossom within the group. And then I would say the third thing is there's just this level of awareness for how we lead. So whether or not you are a, CEO or not, there is leadership within you. And that leadership starts with how you present yourself, how, that postural awareness, that ability to actively listen and then either repeat back or summarize for someone what happened. We do that both verbally and with gesture so that we can embody again that idea of like, I've listened to you, I've taken it in, and here's how I would reflect it back to you non-verbally. Um, it just allows people to step into their power as leaders. And again, doesn't matter if you are the CEO or not. This is an opportunity for you to recognize like, no, wait, I'm a part of this team. I'm a part of this organization and I lead in whatever way I am able. And that's empowering. That's exciting. And so here are some tools that I can leverage in my leadership. So I would say those are like three of the things like embodiment, really getting to see your colleagues do something different and silly and fun. And then having that embodied leadership capability highlighted for you.
Do you ever give opportunity for feedback? Like, I would love to hear my team say, hey, when we get on a Zoom call with you, sometimes we think you're mad. Like, I just have one of those faces. But do you ever give opportunity for maybe teams to talk about vibes that they're getting from each other and work through it? That could get a little sticky.
Yeah, I try to keep the door open for how the team drives the discussion, but we haven't had a team say, "Hey, leader, you're doing this and it makes me uncomfortable," or that hasn't sort of like come out of it yet. But there has been some ahas with leaders where they go, "Oh, when I stand and you're seated and I'm telling you something that is along the disciplinary lines, that might not be the best way to engage with you, even if it's quick, right? Even if it's a very like, hey, I need you to do this better next time, or there was an error here. If I sit on your level, then or if I invite you in to sit at a table with me, then we're now equals in a different way than if I'm standing and you're seated. Maybe I should be more thoughtful about even quick feedback that I'm providing to my team in that way, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there is a level of, I think, self-awareness that comes from this work, but we don't sort of like let a free for all happen where there's a cross, team like critique of their skills and what have you. I think it takes a very specific kind of group to do that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we would certainly want to set the environment and make it a safe space for people to share.
Mm-hmm. I had to in one of my previous jobs, being an assistant to someone, I had to tell my boss that he couldn't stand behind me and talk to me at my desk because he would come up and he'd be like, I need you to write an email and it needs to say these things. And all of a sudden I couldn't type. And he was like, what is wrong with your typing skills? And I had to be like, bro, you can't stand behind me.
Yeah.
You've just raised my anxiety. You've raised your anxiety. We're not being effective and efficient. So yeah, when you say that, like the standing up and the sitting down, I feel that. One of the things I love about Zoom is I'm short, and I'm not short on Zoom.
Right.
It takes
We don't
away
actually know
that
how tall you are.
nobody knows. Like in a regular situation, I'm short and petite, and it could make me, feel inferior. Maybe it's because I have very large brothers, and I've always felt like the baby with them. But on Zoom, that's completely gone. Nobody knows that I'm short. They have no idea. So it does help. And the virtual world, you can't necessarily stand behind someone, but you can still have that hovering effect by accident.
Oh, yeah. I mean, someone sharing their screen and um,
Mhm.
drafting something, that is the most, I think, intimidating sort of version of what you're describing in person, right? But
Yeah,
virtual. It
yeah.
is so hard to spell when everyone on the Zoom call is watching you craft an email, right? There's
Yeah.
also a level of disconnect someone might have to have with the conversation that's going on and the task at hand, right? Because our brains really aren't meant to multitask. Yes, we create some automatic components, right? Like breath, right? Because our bodies have to function while we are walking or conversing or having, doing whatever it is we're doing. But the reality is, the more awareness we can have, the more focus we can have one thing at a time, the more effective we're going to be. And I think
Mhm.
that's another reason why really just locking into what does your breath do? Like when you get nervous, when I get nervous, my breath gets
Oh,
faster.
and
I really try to bring it down. I try to bring it down into my belly. Doesn't
mhm.
always work,
No.
right? My palms get sweaty and
Mhm.
clammy. I get a little nervous, like I get a little shaky, right? Having that awareness and recognizing that my body is responding and not just letting it fly as it could, I think is takes practice. And so, if you're like sharing your screen and trying to navigate a difficult, bit of text or something, it's important to be like, everybody, I'm going to take my I'm not going to share my screen for a second. I will draft and then share it, or I will take this offline and I'll return it back to you, right? I know
Yeah.
we want to be efficient and effective,
Mhm.
but we also don't want to intimidate and ostracize in the moment.
Yeah, I had that experience last night on a call. I was showing the team how to use Asana to set up a project. And I was trying to spell the word coffee and I just couldn't. And it's like a really easy word to spell, but I had like a couple O's in there and like only one E. And I was like, look, y'all, I know how to
Cheers.
spell. I know how to spell. I'm going to come back and spell check it, but we just need to get through this. And also what you were saying about multitasking, I am a monotasker. And we could probably have a whole nother conversation on my feelings on multitasking, but it works for some brains. But I think for the most part, multitasking is the most inefficient thing you can do. So
Absolutely.
100% a monotasker over here. That's awesome. I love that you're bringing this to people and using it in kind of a like a team building way. Like you've got to be vulnerable to know yourself, and you've got to be vulnerable to learn that with your team. And when you have that vulnerability, it probably opens up the space for more conversations. We believe in creating psychological safety in relationships, and that's the ability to say things like, "When you stand behind me, it freaks me out."
Right.
So when everybody has a level of awareness and the ability to kind of reflect their own actions, I think that creates more psychological safety in workspace. So,
And empathy for your colleagues too, right? If you didn't realize that standing behind someone was intimidating, and then you through this workshop you realize, oh wait, this is an asymmetrical relationship, and now I'm in an asymmetrical posture. Perhaps
mhm,
I need to do something different. Oh, now I have empathy for someone else who's navigating something that they didn't realize they were doing either, right? I'm now aware of something that I didn't know before, and I can say, you know what? I have compassion for someone who is navigating something new because I'm doing it myself.
mhm. Yeah, makes everybody kinder, better people. Yeah.
That's what we need, right?
So much, so much. So speaking of, so you're a public health professional. What are some of the themes that you see emerging in 2025 in the mental health sector, especially coming from a leader of your own team? Like we like to see things coming down the pipe, right? Like we look at what's happening with the economy and what's happening with the government and how we can manage that risk and prepare our team. How do we manage the risk of public health risks and prepare and support our teams through them? So what are you seeing coming down that we might be able to prepare for?
Well, I think it's already here. You mentioned mental health. Mental health is something that we want to continue to care for and be aware of. If you think about the way we separate mental and physical health and our priorities, if you break your arm, you're gonna go to the doctor. Like you just will because it hurts. You want to get it. You want to get a cast. You want to get painkillers. You want to make sure that you're get physical therapy once that cast comes off. You want to care for your arm. Your brain and your emotional state are equally, if not more important than you breaking your arm and going to the doctor, right? And so I think we want to recognize, we mentioned the pandemic. We want to recognize that we're all coming out of this collective trauma of a global experience that caused us to change the way we were working. In the US, I think there was a few weeks, maybe months of like, okay, maybe I can let go a little bit and I don't have to work so hard. And then all of a sudden, now we just don't have pee breaks, right? Because instead of walking from meeting to meeting, we're sitting, turning on the Zoom, turning off the Zoom, turning on the Zoom, turning off the Zoom, turning on the, right? It just becomes this like, how much more productive can we be in this space? And so I think mental health is something that, we want to continue to monitor, continue to support, continue to engage with. It's really important that we normalize the need for or the desire to have therapy or counseling services. Normalization of any kinds of anti-anxiety medication or, when we think about a physical ailment, right? I got a headache, I'm going to take an Advil, right? If I have anxiety that's crippling, perhaps there is something that could support me in that way. I don't know that I'm not a doctor. I am a non-clinical public health professional, but I think talking to your doctor, talking to the professionals in the field that can support you in making the right choices for you are something that we want to encourage in our communities. And so I would say monitoring, supporting, and normalizing the conversations around mental health is something I want to do in 2025.
Yeah.
Um,
And one of the things that, so I very strongly believe in mental health, right? Like you go to the doctor for a broken arm, but a broken heart, you're just going to sit at home and self-medicate. That's not healthy.
right,
So love mental health care. I love therapy. As a leader, I try to talk about it with my team. I try to be very open about the fact that I go to therapy. Like it's
right,
been something that's been really big in my journey. And we, for a very inexpensive price, we offer them an EAP, which is an employee assistant program. It gives them like not a lot, but 4 therapy sessions a year. So if there is a situation where they're like something happens, right? A parent dies or a family member gets sick or you go through heartbreak, you at least have that door to walk into, and that professional can refer you out to someone else, and hopefully your health insurance covers it and you have some kind of coverage for it. And then EAP also offers like telehealth therapy as well. So I think as leaders and employers, we have to look at what value add we can give to people and how we really open the conversation about finding mental health, because mentally healthy employees they're just gonna be better employees.
absolutely. And I think EAP programs are the lowest hanging fruit that you can offer, right? It's an
And they're so
opportunity.
accessible.
Yeah, and they're good partners because then there's someone there to follow up with your employees or someone there to, engage with them and make sure that the loop is closed rather than a referral that may not get followed up on. And so
Mhm.
I think that's tremendous because EAP is such a um it, it it has helped me in the past with employers and I know will help me in the future with employees.
Yeah.
Um, I would say the other piece of the puzzle I think that we want to think about from a public health perspective next year, there's lots of shifts and there are a lot of things going on in the world, right? That may impact us in different ways. And so just having an awareness, not necessarily putting a stake in the ground for any particular topic, but like having an awareness of the cacophony of information, of change, of uh, just things happening on a global scale, I think is really critical to our wellness. So when I think about public health, I think of the most expansive definition of public health, which is anything that impacts the way we live, work, or play. And when I think about that, that's basically anything from clean water to bike lanes to, services, to mental health services to the ability to find work, to have proper education and engagement, housing, safety, food access, etc. But I think we want to recognize as leaders that there are a lot of different things going on in the world that might impact an employee's ability to engage. Um, Thinking about what impacts our how we live, work, and play, right? So if you don't have heat, then you're probably not going to be. You might spend more time at the office. Wait, why is this person here so much, right? Or if you are facing, financial challenges, right? There might be an opportunity again to fortify, and EAP is another way that we can do that and provide financial, legal, housing, those services can be put underneath an umbrella of EAP. But I think just being aware that there's a lot of SHIT happening in the world, and we need to be sensitive to that and open about it. You talked about being really transparent with your team about how you're navigating certain things. I think it's very important for leaders to model what they are expecting from their employees. And if they're expecting their employees to be transparent about what's needed, then and have a two-way conversation, then they have to start, right? Start the conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
And they also need to be willing to model those boundaries, right? Like we all, with everything going on in the world, chances are most of your employees have a friend that has a family member or has a family member in a country that is at war right now.
mhm,
And like allowing people to have their boundaries to step away from work and not be on their cell phones 24 hours a day. Like we need that time to process. And
mhm,
as a leader for me, like I have to show that to my team. You're not going to get a response from me on a Saturday because I'm taking the time to process what's going on in my life and getting my own space. And if you can show that to your team is going to set those boundaries as well, which will in turn hopefully make them mentally stronger, and ready to
exactly.
come back when it's time to come back.
Exactly. And I think being honest, right, with ourselves and with our teams about what is needed,
Mhm.
if stepping away is a right choice and things like that.
Yeah.
From a public health perspective, just nationally, I definitely, as a theater maker, I am very interested and will be touching on gun violence, as a
Mhm.
public health crisis, right? Loneliness that feeds into the mental health challenges that we've seen across the U.S. The Surgeon General released a report that said, loneliness can be as detrimental to our health as 15 cigarettes a day, right? So thinking about how are we building community in our workspaces, so that people don't feel alone, so that people aren't left out or ostracized or on the outskirts of the community that we want to have with each other. And then the last thing is AI and the use of technology. It doesn't sound like a public health thing, but when we think about what impacts how we live, work, and play, AI is changing how we work. It's changing our efficiency capabilities. It's changing what we're taking in. It will undoubtedly change education and how students are learning. It will change our medical field and how we are administering healing practices. It will change creativity and how people are partnering with or shunning or acquiesce, like just sort of like giving up to AI being a part of the creative conversation. And I think it's coming faster than I was anticipating. But it also, we have to make choices as leaders and business owners about how we want to incorporate those tools into our structures. And so, from a public health perspective, thinking about still stimulating the human mind, still stimulating and managing and maintaining a set of skills in communication, in collaboration, in understanding, in creative thinking, right? If you're just asking ChatGPT every day, how do I XYZ? You're robbing yourself of the ability to creatively problem solve and
Yeah.
identify what might work in a particular scenario.
Mhm.
Likewise, if you're under a deadline, chat GPT, how do I XYZ, right? So being able to your point of boundaries, right? Being able to manage how we're leveraging these tools in a way that is healthy, supportive of our outcomes, but also doesn't take away from our capabilities and our capacity to really understand the human condition.
Yeah, we were having a conversation the other day in our group chat about AI and how we're using it because we often hear from clients, we want to use AI. And like, okay, that is very, very broad. That's like you telling me you want to buy a car. Like there's so many options here. So we were talking about in the group chat, and one of our team members mentioned that she uses it to help her stay focused, and she shared some of her prompts with us. So when she's struggling with just staying focused, she'll pop into ChatGPT and be like, "Hey, my focus is waning. What can I do?" And ChatGPT will be like, "Here's a breathing exercise," or like, "Get up and what," like tells you the things that you need to know. So she's using it, and I just thought it was the most interesting way to provide herself with like emotional support throughout the day, which was really interesting. So yeah.
I have a friend who uses it to make grocery lists
Mhm.
for healthy diet and like within a certain calorie count and her macros and all of that. So
Yeah.
she doesn't have to do that labor, right? She doesn't have to do any
Right.
math. She's just finding it there. I
Yeah.
have other friends who have used it to support just like refining like a resume, right? Your resume is already written, but you want to like tweak it a little, you want to add a few things. I think those are fine uses of the tool because they enable you to complete the task or stay focused or get some suggestions on what
Yeah.
to do next.
I
I think, go ahead.
we use it when we're interviewing new potential employees. We use it to read their resumes because you read 200 resumes a day, you're going to miss a typo. And we send them out to clients and we can't have typos in them. So we use AI to just be a second set of eyes and make sure that
Is
we
this grammatically correct? Is this like sound? I totally agree. And it can generate some text that then you edit, right? But letting it be the beginning, middle, and end of a particular task or engagement is, I think, going to be a public health challenge in the future, right? Our ability to then empathize, engage with, and collaborate with our fellow colleagues and our community will be challenged if we are sort of, focused in on allowing these AI tools to kind of dictate how we move through the world.
So we can expect some more information from you in the future on AI as a public health crisis. I look forward to that.
I think so. I mean, I'm working with a playwright right now on a play about AI in the medical
Yeah.
space and
Uh-huh.
how it's impacting creativity, how it's supportive, things like that. And she's doing a lot of research around, where is it being used currently? What are the future implications? How are artists partnering with AI?
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to her piece. It's going to be great.
So in the medical space, I was reading in Forbes this morning. Forbes is one of the magazines I read every morning. But they were talking about how health insurance companies use AI to determine whether or not a claim is going to be covered. And the particular health insurance company they were talking about, their AI bot has a 90% failure rate. So when they're when they're denying, if a human were to go through it, 90% of those denials would be acceptances, because their bot just fails. So there's another company that's coming out. It's called Claimable, and they're a startup. They have a product on the market now, but individuals and doctors can use it in AI to write an appeal to the denial. Because we know that when people have a denial, I mean, you don't always have time to appeal it, right? Like
Right.
somebody's having like a major heart attack, like let's not appeal a catheterization, let's just do it.
And then deal
So
with it later.
yeah, so it's and so many problems there with the health insurance, but it was just really fascinating to me that they're using AI to appeal an AI decision.
I mean, I think what is really fascinating about that, right, is like AI, I might say something controversial, but what I'm going to say is the human being is a flawed being. We have biases, we have preferences, we have likes, and we have dislikes. And we have skill sets that vary wildly across our human community. Humans are flawed. Therefore, anything humans make, create, build, whatever is flawed. There is no such thing as perfect. And when you think about the generations of oppression and flaws that have been baked into our systems, our education systems, our housing systems, our banking systems, our, all our government, right? All of these things that have been baked in over generations, those have gone into the to AI, right? And so when we think about AI as a tool, the reason I am opposed to using it as a sole source of information or collaboration is because I recognize it is flawed. I recognize that if I, as a researcher, if I don't know the data, I can't check that AI tool being correct or not correct. The
Yep.
fact that there are companies out there that are making decisions about people's lives and their healthcare and their ability to access and be healthy with a tool that is incorrect and flawed, just like a human, and we're not even trying to do anything about it, is wild to me. And when
Yeah.
I think about public health, sorry, this is the last thing. When I think about public health, um, I think about the ways in which it tries to get upstream of the problem. We try to access solutions before the problem is created. So if we think about a winding road and we recognize that folks often take a turn too fast and they end up like the cars tumble off the cliff. Capitalism and the systems we have built today and like the logic around AI and all of this stuff would build at the bottom of the hill a car repair, a hospital, an insurance company, and all the services you need once your car falls off the cliff. Public health's job is to build a railing, is to put in speed bumps, is to, reduce the speed level, is to close the road so that we prevent any of those things happening. And the challenge that we often have is that push pull between industry and capitalism and what is really best for ourselves, right? And so I think humans are flawed. Humans do need to check AI because AI is going to just continue to be perpetually flawed. But I think that is going to be something that we really grapple with in the future as a public health challenge. For sure.
Very fascinating. So I don't want to take up too much of your time because we're kind of ending our hour here, but so something that I always love to do is talk about challenges that you face as a business owner. I don't think we talk about them enough, right? Like we're out here, we're like, oh, running a
Yeah.
business is so great. Like, no, running a business is hard. And some days I crawl into bed and I'm like, I'm gonna quit. I quit. But I can't quit because there's nobody to accept my resignation. So when we face
Because it's you.
challenges,
It's
it's me.
you.
It's me, and I'm unwilling to accept my own resignation. But when we face challenges during the year, we would look at like how do we problem solve around them, and talking to other business owners about how they're solving their problems is immensely helpful. So tell me about some challenges that you faced in the past year and what your solve was around that, and whether or not the solve worked.
Well, I will say, I will give you a huge compliment, Katie. Lyft has been a tremendous support system for Elevate Theater Company and our internal operations. Having an assistant who understands, what we're trying to do and is believes in our mission and is supportive of that mission has been a solve for a bandwidth issue on my part, right? Being a founder and executive director, it is challenging sometimes to hold all of the pieces of the pie that need to be held, especially while we're still small, right? We contract out a lot of the roles that we need for projects. But when it comes to the day-to-day operations, there's a really small group doing that work. So
Yeah.
having an assistant to kind of hold the bigger picture and navigate the calendar, make sure that the newsletter is happening, make sure the engagement with our team is going well, make sure that our calendars are aligned and accepting the folks who need to partner with us or would like to partner with us. That has been a tremendous support, alleviating some bandwidth challenges, I would say.
Yeah.
Another challenge I think is you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, or maybe I was talking about it with someone else. Now I can't remember. All the conversations are blurring together. Um, But we have workshops with wildly different industries.
Mhm.
And when we work with healthcare, oftentimes there's a level of understanding where folks are like, yeah, we'll do 3 workshops now, we'll do 3 workshops in 6 months, we'll do 3 workshops in 6 months after that. And they understand the long term engagement and the benefits of storytelling over time, skill set building over time. And there are some industries that feel like, oh, we just want you to come in and do a fun tea building thing. We want our team to have a good time on this offsite. And so trying to translate those prospects into a longer term engagement for economic sustainability, right, has been one challenge. And the way we're sort of overcoming that is providing examples of how we've supported other teams over the long term, offering different kinds of packages of workshops, really customizing workshops to fit the industry that we're working with. So that we are not lifting and dropping something into an environment that doesn't necessarily speak that language, but really trying to cater and tailor our work in a way that feels accessible to the individuals who are participating, so that they're not seeing this as an add-on, they're seeing this as part of their day-to-day operations. So yeah, it's been that's been one challenge, I think, is just making sure that like we have that long-term engagement,
Mhm.
wanting, a 5-year contract instead of a 1-year contract.
Yeah. I
There's
think
always, yeah,
y- like as business owners, we hear about like innovation, right? Like you have to innovate, you have to do all these new things, but sometimes adjusting your packages and coming up with new solutions to what your clients need is innovation, right? Like they might not
exactly.
be able to find that anywhere else. So having that ability to be nimble and say, okay, like we can fit this to what you need. However, we know that this is the best way for it to happen. So we're going to give you our side of it, and we expect you to meet us in the middle so that we all get the best outcome. And I
And
think
we,
that's what contractual obligations really set up at the beginning, right? Is like, I need
right,
you to commit to 6 months of this, or it's not going to work and you're not going to see your ROI on it. And having
exactly.
your client understand that. Yeah.
Exactly. And we know that, engaging in the arts is a health behavior, right?
Hmm.
We know that um, some of these activities that we're doing from a theater and storytelling perspective is something that's is fortifying their team.
Hmm.
It can be, there are studies that have shown that like participating in the arts regularly can have some of the same protective impacts on your body and your cognition as going to the gym,
Hmm.
right? So thinking about when we're moving our bodies, when we're using our voices, when we are painting a picture, when we're doing some of these crafts or art forms, we are actually stimulating brain and body in a healthful way. And I think articulating that, to your point, and making sure that folks understand that from the onset, and that longevity is really where you're going to get the biggest investment return is important.
Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful part of business when you get to really step into your knowledge and be like, actually, this is the best way to do it. So that's how we're gonna do this in a more long-term way. Christina, I don't want to cut off our conversation because I feel like we could talk for hours and hours, but I, of course, have another call scheduled right after because why wouldn't I do that to myself?
I mean, make sure you go to the bathroom and take a quick stretch break is
I
my
know.
advice there.
The,
But
the dogs need to go outside too, and I need some sunshine. We're all just house plants. We need water and sunshine. But tell our listeners where they can find you, where they can find more information about you, and the best way to connect with you.
great. Thank you so much again, Katie. This has been fabulous. I love this conversation. You can find us at www.elevatetheatrecompany.com. Theater is spelled Theatre. So making sure that that is in your browser. We're also at info@elevatetheatrecompany.com, and you can find us on Instagram at Elevate Theater Company. So we're on all the platforms. We want to hear from you if you're interested in workshops or consulting services on how you can bring the arts as a healthful tool to your teams. We're very much here and happy to support.
Thank you, Christina, for your time today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.